Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. And I recently got back from seeing It's a Wonderful Knife in theaters. I honestly forgot that it was airing in theaters this weekend, but I decided that, this is pretty much the last night I'd be able to see it because I have stuff going on tomorrow. So I went right after work, got myself a ticket. I was one of the only few people in the theater, which I guess makes sense because I saw it at 150. Um, Quick side note, I wish that these two people in the back would stop talking, but whatever. The story itself was all right. It's a Wonderful Life, but with a slasher twist. It was very similar to Totally Killer, which is funny because this wasn't a Blumhouse film. Although I do think that some of the people who worked on this movie also worked on Happy Death Day and Freaky, but I think that was the case. But the story is all right about how this teenager named Winnie Carruthers kills this slasher called the Angel serial killer, who turns out to be the mayor of the town. And then next year, her life just goes to shit, so she wishes that she were never born. And instead of an angel granting that wish, it's this aurora, kind of like the Northern Lights, that grants the wish. And then the usual shenanigans happen where because she wished she was never born, she's transported to a world where nobody remembers her. And because this is a slasher film, the slasher killer who Winnie killed the year prior is still on the loose. So diving right into the whole killer stuff, the kills were pretty good. They weren't really memorable because most of them are done with a knife. There's a couple that's done with an axe, but for what it's worth, it's pretty bloody, pretty gory. There's just not a lot of variety of kills. There is a little bit of humor, adding in a little bit of a horror comedy too there. Personally, I consider this to be like an elephant in the room. I consider this to be more of a Christmas movie than the actual It's a Wonderful Life film. People can fight me on that, but I do not see It's a Wonderful Life being a Christmas film. The Christmas isn't really mentioned until the very end of the film. The movie's not really about Christmas, it's about George Bailey's life. And Christmas is only shown for one scene at the beginning and then the very ending. But I've already spoken with people about that in person. They disagree with me, but whatever. But fine. Then this movie has way more of a Christmas vibe than Wonderful Life, especially since the killer dresses up as basically a Christmas tree ornament. Which I'll get into that in a second. There's a little bit of a nitpick I have there. The music was fantastic, and going into that, so was the lighting, the camera shots, the angles. The two of my favorite scenes happen at different points in the film, but they're both very similar. The first one, just to describe it. One of the scenes is a kill with an axe, one of the only variety kills. But it's done in a way that they play this sort of horrific macabre version of Carol of the Bells, and there's this manipulation of the lights outside where the lights are constantly flickering, almost like it's a strobe. And it just looks fantastic. And then when the killer, who's dressed up as this angel, kills that person in that scene, like the blood splatter like across basically half of his costume just looks amazing. Um, the acting is okay. I mean, the main character is a teenager, so I'm not really gonna fault the actress on it too much. But like some of the stuff that she says, at least to me, sounds a little bit cringy. Most of the adults do all right. The only adult actors that really stood out for me were Justin Long, and I'll get into him in a minute, and Catherine Isabel, who I haven't really seen her in a lot of movies. I know she was in American Mary, which I still have to see, and she was also in Freddy vs. Jason, in a very minor role, and she was also in Ginger Snaps, which I also need to see. But for the small time that she's in this film, she does okay. From some of the clips that I've seen on YouTube, I've seen better acting from her, especially from the TV show Hannibal. And as for Justin Long himself, who then this isn't a spoiler by the way, because it was in the trailer, who plays the mayor and who is also the serial killer. I'm a little bit on the fence about his acting because I've recently been watching Goosebumps, where he plays not only this professor, Nathan Bratt, but also plays him being possessed by the spirit of a dead kid. And like I've already said in my posts that he does great in those roles, where like he can be campy but also terrifying when he really wants to be. And even in universe, it all makes sense because he's possessed by the spirit of a middle schooler. So even when he's being like corny or whatever, it still makes sense because technically the spirit that possessed him, Harold Biddle, is still a child, right? But here it's not that. Like here when he's the mayor, he kind of has this like sort of accent that I really want to say is like Southern, but I'm not even sure if it's that, but it's like kind of higher pitched than what I've heard from Justin Long, where he sort of sounds like oh hello there, hey now don't cry, like don't worry, I'm the mayor, I'll protect you, kind of like that sort of. And I mean, there's a part of me that really liked his acting where he could just lay it on really thick with trying to be like a really nice guy, even though it was obvious even in the trailers that he was the killer. Like they even unmasked him like in the trailer of the film. But it's not really until the very end where I was finally kind of sold on his acting, and that's in the final 10 minutes where like he has this huge villain monologue, right? So I guess I'm still kind of on the fence about that, because like his whole performance like felt convincing enough, but there was always something that just felt off about it until the final act. But maybe that's just me. Aside from that, the only other things I can think of that was a bit iffy on was going back to the whole angel costume of the serial killer. Like I like the white robe and the white hood, especially with like the blood spatters, because it looks really cool seeing like the really dark red, almost black color against like the white. But the mask doesn't do it for me. Like even when I saw it in the trailer, I thought the mask looked goofy. It looked like somebody melted white chocolate and stuck it to the guy's face. To me, it just looked weird. But again, that's just a nitpick. What isn't a nitpick is, I about 2/3 of the way into the movie, when Winnie goes to see her family, or like what's left of it, um, there's this really short moment where Winnie is talking with a family member, and she reveals something about her family member that no one else would have known if it wasn't like someone in her family. And first of all, I do kind of like that they kept basically everything intact that happened before like the before like the original Angels killings, technically a year prior. Like even though Winnie wished that she was never born, technically events didn't really start changing until the night that she was supposed to kill the Angel serial killer. Which I kind of liked that better than like the movie Flashpoint Paradox, where as great as I liked that film, I kind of called bullshit the moment that the Reverse Flash told Barry that like basically he destroyed the world because he saved his mother. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are going to disagree on that, like especially people who are fans of DC and the Flash in particular. But I never really understood why, because Barry saved his mother from dying, that means Bruce Wayne got killed in the alley and Thomas Wayne became Batman. Or even in this recent Flash movie, why, because Barry saved his mother, then that meant Supergirl came to Earth instead of Superman. Right? How did him saving his mother change the timeline that much? But anyway, in this film, on the bright side, they kept most of the events prior to the Angels' original killings intact, and I kind of liked that where basically like that was kind of like a branched timeline, sort of, if that makes sense. However, going back to the whole thing where Winnie reveals a secret that the family member had that no one else except for her family would know, I always found it a little bit weird that she's the only that Winnie only did that with one family member and didn't do that with anyone else in her family. But that's just me. Moving on from that, there's this instance during the final act where all of a sudden they bring in the plot point of mind control, which, as far as I know, wasn't a thing at all prior to that scene. So to me, it makes no sense how mind control could be a factor, especially since, aside from like wishing herself not being born, the movie was fairly grounded. So I just don't understand how like magic mind control became a thing, especially during the last like 5 or 10 minutes of the film. And finally, and this is like a personal thing for me, I feel like this movie tried to have its cake and eat it too. And I'm not gonna spoil the ending, so you're gonna have to watch it for yourself. But you're gonna know what I'm talking about, or at least have an idea of it. But it does have to do with what they already did in trailers, where they already spoiled that that the killer is the mayor, Justin Long. And I guess I'm not sure if I'm gonna be retroactively spoiling it like this, but I've always had this idea for like a variation of It's a Wonderful Life, where someone wishes they weren't born, it becomes true, but it doesn't exactly have a happy ending where the person gets his life back. Instead, like, that's like a one and done wish. Like he can't reset it or anything. So he basically has to make the best of the life that he now has, right? And I honestly thought for sure that they were going to do something like that in this film, but no, they do exactly what the original Wonderful Life movie did, where everything gets set back to normal. And personally, I think it would have been cooler if they did what I described. But again, that's a personal, purely subjective thing. Um, but now that I'm done talking about like the movie itself, like I said during my post review about Totally Killer, I do think that that doing movies like these are what's going to possibly, hopefully, inject a new life into Hollywood, where like you don't have to remake everything. Like you can take the basic premise of a classic film and repurpose that into something new, like Groundhog Day, um, like the Happy Death Day movies. They basically took the basic premise of Groundhog Day as well as Back to the Future and turned it into like a slasher spoof spinoff, right? Or with Freaky, they took the concept of Freaky Friday and turned it into like a horror slasher, and a pretty good one at that. Totally Killer. Again, they used the premise of Back to the Future, and it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best horror slasher that I've seen. Like of the four, of these four, like I guess you could say like reused concepts. Like I'd say that Totally Killer was my least favorite. But it was still decent. And then like this one obviously was like a retread of It's a Wonderful Life, but with a serial killer twist to it. So I think that the way that that Hollywood should go is like delve back into these into like concepts that have already worked for classic films and like mix them up in a different genre. I mean, hell, look at well, what was that one movie that came out from Guillermo del Toro, The Shape of Water? I mean that was basically just Creature from the Black Lagoon, but with more of a romantic twist to it, like as in a more romance part than the original already was. But that's just completely a suggestion on what I think that they should do instead of constantly doing sequels and remakes and prequels and requels and like different reboots, because eventually that's getting old. I mean, people are saying that like superhero fatigue is running rampant now, which I don't necessarily agree with. I mean, I don't think it's superhero fatigue necessarily, because like we're getting a rebooted version of the Toxic Avenger, and we're getting a rebooted version of the Crow. So it's not superhero fatigue. I think it's specifically like Marvel and DC fatigue. Like, look at what Marvel has done in the last few years. Like, they have been pumping out movie after movie after movie after TV show after movie after show. And eventually people don't want to sit through like 30-some films and 10 TV shows just to understand the plot of the newest thing, right? Like, it was cool on its own back when like the Marvel Cinematic Universe first started, where like technically you could kind of watch the Avengers without watching all the previous films, and you could still kind of be caught up, right? But now, like, you gotta watch WandaVision to know what's happening in Doctor Strange, which the writers didn't even watch WandaVision. Like, the the writers, and I'm pretty sure Sam Raimi even admitted that they didn't watch WandaVision at all. But you're getting the point where, like, you gotta watch WandaVision to see Doctor Strange. You gotta see Miss Marvel and Secret Invasion and the ending of WandaVision and the previous Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame just to understand what's going on with the new movie, The Marvels. Or, like, you gotta watch like Thor: Love and Thunder to understand what's happening with Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which I'm not even sure that if that's true. It's just the last I saw of Thor, he was hanging out with the Guardians of the Galaxy, so I don't know if those movies are even connected or not. But you guys get the point, right? So the way that I think that, basically to wrap this up, It's a Wonderful Life is a great movie. I think it's a great Christmas horror movie. And I personally think that the way they're going with taking the basic concepts of all these classic films and giving them like a horror movie twist, and they don't even necessarily have to do like a horror twist on it. They can mix it up with a different subgenre. I think that's the way for Hollywood to get new ideas, but that's just me. And I'd love to hear anybody else's thoughts on this. And I'll actually see you guys. I'll see you guys in the next review this weekend, because second holiday horror movie in a row. I'm gonna be watching Thanksgiving, which I'm very excited for. So I'll see you guys then. Bye.